Rule number one of being a good wingman is it's the wingman's job to be there. And the definition of there varies by phases of flight and flight lead desires. In some cases, and we have our trusty training aids, you will never lose sight of your flight lead at launch. So this can happen at the field if you do a section go where you roll down the runway at the same time in formation, or what's called a flight leader separation, where flight lead rolls and as soon as he rotates, the wingman goes, but never loses sight of him during the departure. And as you can see, sometimes this happens at the ship. Here's a sequence, VF-31, F-14s launching CATs 2, 3, and 1 respectively. Let's imagine the guy on CAT 2 is the flight lead, and let's say his wingman is the guy who launches on CAT 1. So you can see the guy on CAT 1 never loses sight of him. And so that makes the problem a little easier. But generally, especially at the ship, you'll lose sight of your lead because in most cases, your flight lead will launch a couple of minutes before you. So first airplane off complies with case 1 because we're talking about case 1 daytime procedures here to keep the discussion focused. So you launch off CAT 1, boom, right-hand clearing turn, parallel BRC, drive out to 10 miles, climb up to whatever the briefed holding altitude was. So let's say in this case, we briefed, I'll meet you at high holding. And let's say that high holding in accordance with our case 1 CV mobility TAC note is 20,000 feet. So the flight lead is up there at 20,000 feet, 250 knots as briefed, in a gentle left-hand turn, arcing above the ship in a 5-mile circle. Meanwhile, the wingman's waiting to launch, finally gets the CAT, boom, he's off. Let's say he launches on CAT 3 for the sake of this discussion. Left-hand clearing turn, parallels BRC, up to 10 miles. So overhead the ship, 5-mile circle, point 1 is the boat. Clock code counterclockwise 2, 3, 4 would be the 4 points of that circle. So maybe the lead says, I'm approaching point 3. So then the wingman, when he gets up to 20,000 feet, knows where to look. Point 3, you're at point 2, so you're looking over here at about 9 o'clock. Now we want to get aboard, operative words, safely and expeditiously. Because we have places to be and bandits to kill, we don't want to hang out in high holding for an inordinate amount of time waiting for the wingman to get aboard. Further, we don't want to have a midair because the wingman was overzealous in his rendezvous. Safe and expeditious. So the first key to effecting a safe, expeditious rendezvous is getting on the 45-degree bearing line, as I've scribed here, using my rough interpretation of an F-14 with its wings at 68 degrees, fully back. As briefed, flight lead, 20,000 feet, 250 knots, standard rate left-hand turn. Wingman climbs up, gets his tally, and figures out what he needs to do to get to that 45-degree bearing line. Various types of pursuit. Lead pursuit is where the nose is in front of the flight lead to fly a smaller radius turn in order to effect closure. Pure pursuit is where I'm pointed at the flight lead. And depending on my airspeed, that's either a fast way to close to where I need to be, or it could be inefficient. And then lag pursuit is if my intercept is too hot, or I'm ahead of the 45-degree bearing line, I need to fly lag pursuit to get to that 45-degree bearing line. So at the 45-degree bearing line, inside of a mile and a half, I want to stop pointing at my flight lead and do what's called align the fuselages. Now I will effect closure by using angle of bank. A flight lead does not want to see his wingman pointing at him at a mile and a half, or never mind, inside of a mile and a half. So now we're aligning the fuselages, and I'm going to use angle of bank to close to parade position. In the event you are not hacking it, you want to underrun. Never overrun, no canopy rolls over the top, and never go belly up to your lead in an attempt to salvage a bad rendezvous. Your flight lead does not want to see the belly of your airplane. And if he loses sight of your helmet, you're probably going to piss him off. So in the event it's not working and you have too much closure, underrun and then establish on the outside and get aboard that way. That's not as good as getting aboard safely the right way, but if you've gooned it up, underrun. Like the other things in naval aviation that we've talked about on other episodes, in-flight refueling, dogfighting, landing at the boat, practice is the key to getting proficient. So when I was a RAG instructor, in the familiarization phase of the syllabus, we had a mission called Breakup and Rendezvous. And the basic conduct of those flights was the wingman would establish 1.5 miles behind the flight lead. At that point, flight lead would go into a standard rate turn. The wingman would let him drift out to about 10 o'clock or 2 o'clock, depending on what side he was on. He'd jump on bearing line and do a safe and expeditious rendezvous using angle of bank to get to parade position. Once established safely, would cross under the other side, and then the flight lead would roll out. At that point, the flight lead would break off, do a 180-degree turn, and then the wingman would follow behind him, and they'd be established in a 1.5 mile trail. And they do it all over again, either direction. So this was a way to get multiple rendezvous done in a short amount of time. Now, once you're aboard, you need to stay aboard. So the assumption of the flight lead is you're going to join in parade until he puts you somewhere else. And a wingman should take pride in flying good parade. So in the F-14, I have my other training aid. The sight picture for parade was put the leading edge of the intake on the Rio's ejection triangle. So this is what you would see here if you're flying good parade. And you just maintain that sight picture regardless of what the flight lead does. You can imagine this takes a lot of concentration. I remember flying with the skipper, and he'd put the nuggets through their paces, where they'd join up in parade and he'd suddenly just pull into the vertical and see if they hung on. Maybe do a loop or a barrel roll. All he wanted to see was, is that wingman going to hang in there? And I'm pleased to say that almost 100% of the time, these brand new nugget pilots did hang in there. Again, it's the wingman's responsibility to be there. So that's the sight picture. So whatever your sight picture is for your airplane, establish it and then maintain it. Right. So two different types of parade. There's VFR parade, which we generally use during the daytime, around the ship, around the field. So VFR parade is you keep the flight lead on the horizon when he maneuvers. IFR parade is you maintain the plane of the wing line when the flight lead maneuvers. So for instance, you use IFR parade when you're on the heavy tanker. The reason for that is if you're approaching the tankers, you can tell how many guys are on the wing easier. So that's IFR parade, VFR parade. Sometimes when you're flying parade, you might inadvertently fly into the clouds. And in some cases, those clouds could be really thick. A trick that we used in the F-14 community is instead of flying here, if you get in the goo, you'd slide back and fly formation off of the horizontal stab, which gave you some wiggle room and allowed you to tuck in even tighter. In the event you completely lose sight of your lead in the goo, you need to sing out, and both airplanes need to turn away from each other. Try to find clear air in order to join back up. Do not attempt to join up IFR. Do not wildly deviate from your flight path because there could be other airplanes around as well. As I said, the flight lead's expectation is the wingman will join safely, expeditiously, and get in parade. The wingman should expect to stay in parade until the flight lead puts him somewhere else. So the options are, if the flight lead gives this, that means go ahead and go into loose cruise. So loose cruise is not trail, but out here at a 45 degree, 60 degree cone. So if he wants to maneuver, you're still kind of have mutual support, but your workload isn't as hard as it is when you're in parade. The other basic position of a wingman, pilot gives you one of these. That means push it into combat spread. So combat spread is your tactical formation where Both airplanes can maintain mutual support. Both Sam's on the ground and Bandit's in the air. Behind is called sucked. Ahead is called acute. You want to be right down the wing line, 1.5 miles. Maintaining mutual support. If he gives you one of these, that means come back to parade. So drop back to your 45-degree bearing line and then join using angle of bank as we described before. All right, so those are the basics of how to be a good wingman. And if you follow those guidelines,
you can be my wingman anytime.
That'll do it for this episode. If you're a first-time viewer, please ring the bell and become a subscriber so you don't miss anything. Give me the likes. Very important in the YouTube algorithm. Comment. I love the comments, and as you can see, I engage as much as I can. And if you'd like to help us take this channel to the next level, please join our patrons at patreon.com/WardCarroll. Check the links below for official merch, t-shirts, and coffee mugs, and also where to get my debut novel, Punk's War. And I look forward to talking to you again soon.